a secret hidden for 22 years, a lawsuit that exploded into LeBron James's life like a bomb, DNA test results about to be revealed live on television, and these results could shake the king's throne to its very foundation. Because the 22-year-old man standing across from him claims to be LeBron's son, and he has evidence. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity on that Tuesday morning in Los Angeles. Every seat filled, media crews from every major network positioned strategically with their cameras, the air thick with anticipation and tension you could almost taste. This wasn't just another celebrity lawsuit. This was potentially the biggest scandal in sports history, about to unfold in real time. LeBron James sat at the defendant's table, his usual confident demeanor noticeably absent. His jaw was clenched tight, his hands clasped together so firmly his knuckles had turned white. Next to him, his legal team, 5 of the most expensive attorneys money could buy, shuffled through documents with barely concealed anxiety. Across the aisle sat Marcus Johnson, 22 years old, tall, 6'7" to be exact, athletic build, and if you looked closely, unsettlingly familiar features, the same strong jawline, the same penetrating eyes, the same natural athleticism evident even in the way he sat. He wore a simple dark suit, but his presence filled the room. His own legal team flanked him, and in his hands, he held a manila folder that supposedly contained evidence that would change everything. But let me back up. Because to understand how we got to this moment, you need to know the whole story, and it starts 23 years ago, in the summer of 2002, when LeBron James was just 17 years old. It was July 2002. LeBron had just finished his junior year at St. Vincent St. Mary High School in Akron, Ohio. He was already being called the chosen one by Sports Illustrated, already being compared to Michael Jordan, already projected as the future #1 pick in the NBA draft, already under intense scrutiny from every angle imaginable, but he was still 17. Still technically a kid, still making mistakes that 17-year-olds make. That summer, LeBron attended a basketball camp in Cleveland, an elite AAU tournament that drew top high school talent from across the country. It was there that he met Jasmine Taylor. She was 19, a college sophomore at Ohio State, working at the camp as a volunteer coordinator, beautiful, smart, mature beyond her years. And she was drawn to the magnetic young basketball phenom that everyone was talking about. They spent time together during that week, late-night conversations after the games, stolen moments away from the cameras and the crowds. For LeBron, it was a rare chance to just be a normal teenager with a girl who seemed to see him as more than just a future NBA star. For Jasmine, it was an intoxicating connection with someone who, despite all the hype and attention, still had vulnerability and genuine charm. What happened between them that week was private, or at least it was supposed to stay private. When the camp ended, they went their separate ways. LeBron returned to Akron to prepare for his senior year and the massive expectations that came with it. Jasmine went back to Columbus to continue her studies at Ohio State. They exchanged a few text messages over the next couple of weeks, but the communication gradually faded. Different worlds, different trajectories, different futures pulling them in opposite directions. And then, 6 weeks after the camp ended, Jasmine discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified, confused, overwhelmed. She was 19 years old, a college student with dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse, suddenly facing an impossible situation. The father of her child was the most famous teenager in America, someone whose face was on magazine covers, someone who was being projected to sign a contract worth tens of millions of dollars within a year. Jasmine tried to contact LeBron multiple times. She called his phone. The number went straight to voicemail every time. She sent text messages that went unanswered. She even tried reaching out through mutual acquaintances from the camp, but the messages never seemed to get through to him. LeBron's inner circle had already tightened considerably by that point. His mother Gloria and his advisors were carefully controlling access to him, protecting him from distractions as he prepared for what everyone knew would be his final year before entering the NBA. Whether LeBron ever actually received Jasmine's messages is something only he knows. His lawyers would later claim he never got them, that they were filtered out by protective handlers who received hundreds of messages from girls claiming various connections to the young star. Jasmine's lawyers would argue that the messages were deliberately ignored, that LeBron knew about the pregnancy and made a conscious choice to distance himself from the situation. The truth, as is often the case, probably lies somewhere in the complicated middle. What is certain is that Jasmine, feeling abandoned and alone, made a decision. She decided not to pursue LeBron publicly, not to go to the media with her story, not to try to force a paternity test or demand child support. She was proud, independent, and frankly terrified of what going public would mean for her life. The media circus, the accusations of being a gold digger, the invasive scrutiny into every aspect of her personal life. Instead, she decided to handle it on her own. She took a semester off from college. She moved back home with her parents in a small town outside of Cleveland, and on March 15, 2003, Just 3 months before LeBron would be drafted first overall by the Cleveland Cavaliers, she gave birth to a baby boy. She named him Marcus. Jasmine's parents were supportive, but realistic. They knew their daughter was choosing a difficult path. Raising a child alone, finishing college while being a single mother, watching from afar as the father of her child became one of the most famous athletes on the planet. But they also understood her reasoning. They saw the way girls who came forward with similar claims against celebrities were treated in the media. They knew the legal battles could drag on for years. They respected their daughter's choice to maintain her dignity and raise her son in peace, away from the spotlight. So Marcus grew up knowing almost nothing about his father. Jasmine told him his father was someone she'd met briefly who wasn't part of their lives, which was technically true. She worked hard, finished her nursing degree, built a good life for them. Marcus was raised by his mother and grandparents, and for the most part, it was enough. But as Marcus got older, as he grew taller and more athletic, as people started commenting on his basketball abilities and his physical resemblance to a certain NBA superstar, questions naturally arose. Who was his father? Why wasn't he around? The pieces didn't quite add up. When Marcus turned 16, Jasmine finally told him the truth, or at least, as much of the truth as she knew. She told him about the basketball camp, about LeBron James, about how she'd tried to reach out and never heard back, about her decision to raise him alone, rather than pursue a public paternity case. Marcus's reaction was complicated: anger at being kept in the dark, confusion about his identity, curiosity about the man who was supposedly his father, but also respect for his mother's choice and gratitude for the life she'd worked so hard to provide for him. For a while, Marcus did nothing with this information. He continued living his life, playing basketball at his high school, where he was a solid player, but nowhere near the generational talent his alleged father had been. He researched LeBron obsessively online, watching games, reading interviews, studying photos, and trying to see similarities in their features. And the more he looked, the more convinced he became. The facial structure was similar, the body type, even some of the mannerisms and gestures. But conviction isn't proof, and Marcus understood that without DNA evidence, any claim he made would be dismissed as the fantasy of another person seeking attention and money from a celebrity. Then everything changed in Marcus's junior year of college. He was attending Kent State University, studying business, playing basketball at the club level, living a relatively normal life. One night, he attended a charity basketball event in Cleveland, a local fundraiser where current and former NBA players participated. LeBron wasn't there personally, but his foundation had donated equipment and his brand was heavily featured. During the event, Marcus struck up a conversation with someone who claimed to have connections to LeBron's inner circle from the early days. After a few drinks, Marcus mentioned his story, carefully, hypothetically, not revealing his own identity at first. The man listened intently, then said something that changed everything. "You know," the man had said, "there were rumors back in the day, 2002, 2003, about a girl from a basketball camp. People close to LeBron knew something had happened, but it got buried. His handlers made sure of it. If you're who I think you might be, you're not the first person to bring this up. You might just be the first person brave enough to actually do something about it." That conversation planted a seed. Part of him wanted to leave it alone, to continue living his life without the complications this would bring. But another part, a growing part, felt he deserved to know the truth, deserved to have his father acknowledge his existence, deserved, perhaps, some of the opportunities that came with being LeBron James's son. Marcus also thought about his mother, all the sacrifices she'd made, all the years of struggle, the child support payments that never came, the financial burden she'd carried alone, the justice of it all. So he hired a lawyer, not some ambulance chaser looking for a quick settlement, but a respected family law attorney named David Chen, who had handled high-profile paternity cases before. Chen listened to Marcus's story, reviewed what little documentation Jasmine had saved from 2002, some text message records, photos from the camp, a few witnesses who could confirm they'd seen Marcus and LeBron together that week, and advised him honestly. "The evidence is circumstantial," Chen had said. "Without DNA, we can't prove anything definitively, but we have enough to file a paternity suit and compel a DNA test. The question is whether you're ready for what comes next. Because once we file this, your life changes forever, no matter the outcome." Marcus thought about it for exactly 1 week. Then he told Chen to file the lawsuit. The day the lawsuit became public was chaos. TMZ broke the story first. 22-year-old man claims LeBron James is his father, demands DNA test. Within hours, it was trending #1 on Twitter. Within a day, every major media outlet was covering it. Cable news shows were debating it. Sports talk radio was consumed by it. The initial public reaction was skepticism, mixed with tabloid excitement. This kind of claim wasn't unusual for celebrities, particularly athletes. There had been similar cases with NBA players before, some proven true, some proven false, many settled quietly before reaching any definitive conclusion. But something about Marcus's case felt different. He wasn't asking for money up front. He wasn't doing media interviews or selling his story to tabloids. He was simply asking for a court-ordered paternity test, something he legally had the right to request. His lawyer released a carefully worded statement. "My client simply wants to know the truth about his biological father. He believes he has a right to that truth. We are asking the court to compel a DNA test that will provide definitive answers for everyone involved." LeBron's initial response, through his representatives, was swift and dismissive. "Mr. James has been the target of numerous false claims over the years. This appears to be another attempt by someone seeking attention and financial gain. Mr. James has never met the plaintiff and categorically denies these allegations." But that denial created its own problems, because Jasmine still had those photos from the camp, and while they didn't prove paternity, they did prove LeBron's statement about never meeting Marcus's mother was at minimum inaccurate. When those photos surfaced, pictures of young LeBron and Jasmine together at the camp, clearly comfortable with each other, clearly more than strangers, LeBron's legal team had to walk back their statement. They issued a revised response. Mr. James may have met the plaintiff's mother briefly at a basketball event many years ago, but maintains he had no knowledge of any pregnancy and is not the father of the plaintiff. That revision only made things worse in the court of public opinion. If LeBron had met Jasmine, why had his first statement said he hadn't? What else might he not be telling the truth about? The case moved through the legal system faster than anyone expected. Marcus's legal team was aggressive, pushing for a quick resolution. They filed motions requesting an expedited paternity test. They presented their evidence to the court, the photos, the text message records, witness statements from people who'd seen LeBron and Jasmine together at the camp, and most compellingly, photos of Marcus that highlighted his striking physical resemblance to a young LeBron. LeBron's legal team tried multiple strategies to delay or dismiss the case. They argued that the statute of limitations had passed for paternity claims in Ohio. They questioned Marcus's motives, suggesting this was merely a shakedown attempt. They argued that the evidence was insufficient to warrant a court-ordered DNA test. But Judge Catherine Morrison, the family court judge assigned to the case, wasn't buying it. In a preliminary hearing that made national news, she looked directly at LeBron's lead attorney and said something that would be quoted everywhere. "Counselor, your client is one of the most famous athletes in the world. He has built his brand on family values and being a present father to his children. If he has nothing to hide, a simple DNA test resolves this immediately." The court sees no compelling reason to deny the plaintiff's reasonable request. She ordered the DNA test. Both parties would submit samples to an independent laboratory. Results would be made available to the court within 2 weeks. And in a highly unusual decision that would be debated by legal experts for months afterward, Judge Morrison ruled that the results would be read in open court, allowing the media to be present. Her reasoning was practical if controversial. This case has already played out in the public sphere. Rumors and speculation are running rampant. A private disclosure would only fuel more conspiracy theories and doubt. The only way to ensure public trust in the results is transparency. Therefore, the results will be read in open court, where everyone can hear them simultaneously. That decision brought us to this moment, this courtroom, this Tuesday morning with every major media outlet present and the world watching. But here's what nobody in that courtroom knew yet, what would only come out in the following minutes. The case wasn't quite as simple as it appeared. Judge Morrison entered the courtroom, and everyone rose. She was in her late 50s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, sharp eyes that had seen every kind of family law case imaginable, and a no-nonsense demeanor that commanded respect. "Be seated," she said crisply. She looked out at the packed courtroom, at the cameras, at the two central figures in this drama. "This is highly unusual, but these are unusual circumstances. The court has received the DNA test results from Genetics Laboratory Associates, an independent facility of unquestionable reputation. I will now read these results into the record." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. LeBron's jaw tightened even further. Savannah, his wife, who had been notably absent from previous hearings, was not present today either, a detail that hadn't gone unnoticed by the media. Marcus sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the judge. Judge Morrison opened the sealed envelope in her hands. She read silently for a moment, and something flickered across her face. Surprise? Confusion? It was gone too quickly to identify. "The DNA test results," she began, comparing samples from LeBron James and Marcus Taylor Johnson show. She paused. The pause felt like an eternity. A 99.9% probability of paternity. The courtroom exploded. Gasps, shouts, the sound of cameras clicking frantically. Reporters rushing for the exits to break the news. LeBron's attorneys immediately huddling around him. Marcus's head dropping into his hands. Judge Morrison banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order. I will have order in this courtroom." It took several minutes for the chaos to settle. When it did, everyone's attention was on LeBron, the king, the man who had built his public image partly on being a devoted family man, the father who posted constantly about his 3 children with Savannah, the man who had, apparently, another son he'd never acknowledged for 22 years. LeBron's face was a mask. Years of media training had taught him how to control his expressions, but if you looked closely enough you could see the cracks, the slight tremor in his hands, the way his eyes seemed unfocused, the visible effort it took him to maintain composure. But then Judge Morrison said something that changed everything again. "However," she continued, and that single word cut through the noise like a knife, "the court has discovered additional information that must be addressed before we proceed further." Everyone froze. What additional information? The DNA results seemed definitive. "It has come to the court's attention," Judge Morrison said carefully, "that the plaintiff, Marcus Johnson, was aware of these results before today." Marcus's head snapped up, his attorney looked confused. "In fact," the judge continued, looking directly at Marcus now, "the plaintiff obtained a private DNA test 3 months ago, prior to filing this lawsuit, a test conducted using a sample obtained without Mr. James's knowledge or consent." The courtroom stirred again. How had Marcus gotten LeBron's DNA without his consent? Marcus's attorney, David Chen, stood immediately. "Your Honor, I was not aware of any prior testing. My client assured me." "Your client," Judge Morrison interrupted, her voice hard, "hired a private investigator who obtained a DNA sample from a glass Mr. James used at a public event. That sample was sent to a private laboratory. The results came back 3 months ago, showing the same paternity probability we see today." Everyone was staring at Marcus now. If he already knew he was LeBron's son, why file the lawsuit? Why go through this public spectacle? Judge Morrison wasn't finished. "The court has obtained records showing that after receiving these private test results, the plaintiff attempted to contact Mr. James directly, not through legal channels, not through official representatives, but through a series of messages that could reasonably be interpreted as—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But extortion." The word hit like a bomb. Marcus's face went pale. His attorney looked stricken. "The plaintiff sent messages to Mr. James stating that he had proof of paternity, and would go public with this information, unless Mr. James agreed to meet with him privately and make things right. The messages included specific dollar amounts that would be required to compensate the plaintiff's mother for years of raising him alone." LeBron's attorney was on his feet immediately. "Your Honor, this changes everything. These are extortion charges, criminal charges. The plaintiff has—" But then something unexpected happened. Something nobody saw coming. LeBron stood up. His attorney tried to pull him back down, but LeBron gently removed the man's hand from his arm. He looked across the courtroom at Marcus, really looked at him, and for the first time since this case began, his carefully constructed mask crumbled completely. "Your Honor," LeBron said, his voice rough with emotion, "may I speak?" Judge Morrison looked surprised but nodded. "You may." LeBron took a deep breath. "I need to tell the truth. All of it." His legal team was frantically whispering to him, trying to stop him, but he ignored them. He kept his eyes on Marcus. "I got those messages," LeBron said quietly. 3 months ago. I got them, and I knew exactly what they meant, because—" He stopped, swallowed hard, continued, "because I already knew about Marcus." The courtroom erupted again. Judge Morrison banged her gavel, but even she seemed too shocked to restore order immediately. "I've known since 2003, LeBron continued, his voice stronger now, like a weight was lifting as he spoke. "Jasmine did reach out to me, multiple times. I was 17, terrified, overwhelmed. My mother, my advisors, they all told me to ignore it. They said girls would try to trap me. They said it was probably not even my child. They said getting involved would destroy my career before it started." He looked down at his hands. "So I listened to them. I let them handle it. They offered Jasmine money to go away quietly, but she refused. She said she didn't want money. She just wanted me to acknowledge my son, to be present in his life. And I said no. I was 18 years old, about to sign a $90 million contract with Nike, about to become the first pick in the NBA draft. I convinced myself that everyone was right, that this was just someone trying to take advantage of me. I told myself that if I was really the father, she would have pushed harder, would have gone to court sooner. I used her dignity against her." The courtroom was silent now, except for LeBron's voice. "Over the years I thought about him, about Marcus, wondered what kind of person he was becoming, wondered if he looked like me, wondered if he played basketball, but I never reached out, never tried to be part of his life. I told myself I was protecting my family, Savannah and my 3 children. But really, I was just protecting my image, my brand, my legacy." He finally looked directly at Marcus, who was openly crying now. "When I got those messages 3 months ago, I knew it was real. I knew my son was finally asking for what he'd always deserved: acknowledgement, recognition, justice. And instead of doing the right thing, instead of finally being the father I should have been 22 years ago, I had my lawyers prepare for battle. I was ready to fight him in court, to make him prove in the most public, humiliating way possible that I was his father." LeBron's own eyes were wet now. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry for not being there. I'm sorry for denying you. I'm sorry for putting you through this. You deserved better. You've always deserved better." The courtroom was utterly silent. Cameras were still rolling, capturing every word, every emotion. This was no longer just a paternity case. This was something much more profound, a public reckoning, a confession, a moment of truth that would define LeBron James in ways no championship ever could. Marcus was sobbing quietly, his shoulders shaking. His mother, Jasmine, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, made her way forward. The bailiff should have stopped her, but even he seemed too moved to enforce protocol. Jasmine put her arms around her son. Then she looked at LeBron, and in her eyes was not anger, but something more complex. Understanding, perhaps, or simply exhaustion from carrying this secret for so long. "I never wanted money," Jasmine said quietly. "I just wanted you to know your son." Judge Morrison, who had been motionless throughout LeBron's speech, finally spoke. Her voice was softer now, the stern judge replaced by a woman who had seen the human cost of pride and fear. "Mr. James," she said, "your honesty today, while perhaps long overdue, is noted by the court. Mr. Johnson, you made serious mistakes in how you approached this situation. The messages you sent could indeed be viewed as extortion, regardless of your underlying grievance." She paused. "However, this court is not interested in punishing anyone further. Enough damage has been done. The DNA results are definitive. Mr. James is the biological father of Marcus Johnson. What happens from here is not for the court to decide. This is now a matter for the three of you, Mr. James, Miss Taylor, and Mr. Johnson, to resolve as a family, if that's what you choose to become." She looked at all three of them. The law can establish paternity, it can order support payments, it can enforce visitation rights, but it cannot create relationships, it cannot manufacture trust, it cannot undo 22 years of absence. Only you can decide whether to do that difficult work. I hope for all your sakes that you make better choices going forward than were made in the past. With that, she struck her gavel one final time. This case is closed. The courtroom remained quiet as people slowly began to file out. The media were already broadcasting breaking news alerts. Social media was exploding with reactions. The story was dominating every channel, every platform, but inside that courtroom, three people remained. LeBron, Marcus, and Jasmine. Three people bound together by choices made 23 years ago at a basketball camp, by messages sent and not sent, by a truth finally spoken. LeBron approached them slowly. Marcus stood, wiping his eyes. They faced each other, father and son, strangers yet somehow familiar. "I don't know how to make this right," LeBron said. "I don't know if I can, but I want to try. If you'll let me." Marcus looked at his mother. She nodded slightly. Then Marcus looked back at LeBron. "I don't know either," Marcus said, "but I think I'd like to try too." It wasn't a Hollywood ending. There were no immediate hugs, no dramatic reconciliation. Just two men acknowledging a truth and agreeing to take the first small steps towards something resembling a relationship. The full story would take weeks to come out. Media investigations revealed the whole timeline: the 2002 basketball camp, the attempts to contact LeBron, the offers of money to make it go away, the years of silence. Some people defended LeBron, saying he'd been just a kid himself when this happened. Others condemned him for abandoning his son for over 2 decades. Still others focused on Marcus's extortion attempt, arguing that he'd lost the moral high ground by trying to squeeze money from LeBron before going public. The truth, as always, was complicated. Everyone in this story made mistakes. Everyone had their reasons. Everyone carried pain. LeBron's public image took a massive hit. Sponsors were nervous. Some endorsement deals were quietly renegotiated. His social media presence, once centered on family values, became far more cautious. But he didn't hide. He addressed it in interviews, taking full responsibility for his actions and inactions. "I failed my son," he said in one notable interview. "I can't change that. I can only try to be better going forward. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just trying to show up, finally, for the son I abandoned." Marcus, for his part, faced his own backlash for the extortion attempt. He publicly apologized for his approach, explaining, but not excusing, that he'd acted out of anger and frustration after years of being ignored. And Jasmine, she remained mostly private, as she'd always been. In one brief statement, she said, "I raised a good man. That's all I ever wanted to do. The rest is between him and his father now." Over the following months, LeBron and Marcus did begin building a relationship. It was slow, awkward, filled with difficult conversations and painful honesty. They met regularly, often with Jasmine present, sometimes with therapists mediating. They weren't trying to create a fairy tale. They were just trying to create something real. LeBron introduced Marcus to his other children, Bronny, Bryce, and Zuri. That was perhaps the most difficult moment of all, explaining to them that they had a brother they'd never known about. But kids are often more resilient and accepting than adults. They adapted, eventually welcoming Marcus into their extended family. Savannah, LeBron's wife, had known about Marcus for years. LeBron had confessed the truth to her before they got married, and she had supported his decision to stay quiet, believing his lawyer's assurances that the paternity could never be proven. Learning that she'd been complicit in this silence was difficult for her, She and Marcus had their own conversations, their own reconciliation to work through. The story of LeBron James and his secret son became one of the biggest sports scandals of the decade. But it also became something more, a cautionary tale about the cost of fame, the burden of secrets, and the difficulty of doing the right thing when you're afraid of the consequences. A year after the DNA results were read in that courtroom, LeBron sat down for a documentary interview. The filmmaker asked him what he'd learned from the experience. LeBron was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I learned that you can't outrun truth. You can delay it, hide from it, deny it. But eventually, it finds you. And when it does, the question isn't whether you'll face consequences. The question is whether you'll finally do the right thing, even if it's 22 years too late." He paused, then added, "I also learned that being the king doesn't mean much if you're not a good father. That's the legacy that really matters. Not championships, not records, not money. Whether you show up for your kids, all of them." The interviewer asked if he regretted how everything played out. "Every day," LeBron said without hesitation, "I regret not being there for Marcus's first steps, his first words, his first basketball game, his graduation, all of it. I can't get those moments back, but I can try to be there for the moments ahead. That's all I can do now." Marcus, in his own interview for the same documentary, was asked if he'd forgiven his father. "Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip," he said thoughtfully. "It's a process, a choice you make every day. Some days it's easier than others. But I think we're building something. It's not what it would have been if he'd been there from the start, but it's something, and that's more than we had before." The scandal eventually faded from daily headlines, replaced by new dramas and controversies as they always are, but it left a permanent mark on LeBron's legacy, on Marcus's life, on the public conversation about athlete responsibilities and the children born from brief encounters in their youth. It also started a broader discussion. How many other athletes had similar secrets? How many other children were out there, unacknowledged by famous fathers? The NBA quietly updated its rookie orientation program to include extensive discussions about paternity, responsibility, and the legal and moral obligations that come with fatherhood. Some good did come from this painful story. LeBron and Marcus partnered to create a foundation supporting single mothers and their children, kids growing up without fathers present. They spoke at schools about responsibility and the importance of family. They tried to transform their personal failure into something that might help others avoid similar mistakes. It wasn't redemption exactly. Some wrongs can't be fully righted, some absences can't be compensated for, but it was something, an acknowledgement, an effort, a step forward, and sometimes that's all we can ask for. Not perfection, not fairy tale endings, just people trying to do better after doing wrong, just families finding their way through complicated truths to something resembling peace. The DNA test that could have destroyed LeBron's legacy did in many ways alter it permanently. He would never again be seen as the unquestioned family man he'd portrayed himself as. His image was forever complicated by the knowledge that he'd abandoned a son for over 2 decades. But perhaps that complicated legacy is more honest, more human, more real than the perfect image ever was. Because the truth is, we all make mistakes. We all fail people who deserve better from us. We all have moments we'd take back if we could. The question isn't whether we'll mess up. The question is what we do afterward. Whether we keep hiding, keep denying, keep running, or whether we finally stop, turn around, and face the truth we've been avoiding. LeBron James ran for 22 years, but eventually the truth caught up. And when it did, he finally made the choice he should have made, so long ago. He acknowledged his son. He faced his failure. He tried to build something from the wreckage. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. But it was a start. And sometimes, a start is all we can hope for.